Hallo alle zusammen, wir machen weiter heute mit conjunctions. Hi everyone, we're going to continue with conjunctions today. So notice this says part 2, but there isn't a part 1 right now. That's because part 1 was done a long time ago. Part 1 involved a group of conjunctions that we call coordinating conjunctions. And coordinating conjunctions are conjunctions that connect sentences, just, conjunction, but that make the sentences coordinate as far as word order go. That means there is no change in word order. So, there are 5 of them that we learned. Those were und, oder, aber, sondern, and denn, and I'm going to put denn at the front, at the top. So we have denn und, oder, aber, and sondern, and those meant, what did those mean? Ding, ding, ding. All right, so those meant because, and, or, but, and but rather. And you guys should have a handout that has a little bit more of an explanation of the but and but rather difference. You should remember that. This one required a nicht in the previous statement. But just to give you guys some sample sentences. So if I had a sentence like, ich gehe heute Abend mit Susi ins Kino. Right? Just a normal sentence. I have my verb, that's the important element here, my verb in second place. So here's my verb. And of course that was what our most important rule, that verb stays in second place. So I can rearrange this and say, heute Abend gehe ich mit Susi ins Kino. Fine, but that verb has to be in second place. Now, of course, we have some other rules back here. So, for example, we have time, manner, and place. So, this evening with Susie to the theater. I am going to the theater with Susie this evening or tonight. Right? So, we're going in a different order than in German or than in English, but your verb is in second place. Remember your verb. Here's my verb. Now I'm going to add a second sentence to this. I'm going to add to it. I'm going to say, ich gehe morgen mit Mark ins Café. I'm going to join him at the coffee shop. Okay. So again, I have a sentence. I kept my verb in second place. Right, here's my verb, second place, it's a second sentence. Now when speaking, you wouldn't say all of this. You wouldn't say both of these really long sentences. You would probably combine them with an and. So, I can put an und in between, and everything else stays the same. I don't have to change anything. This is considered an accurate German sentence. Just like in English, because our subject and our verb are the same, in the first sentence as in the second sentence, I could probably drop these. But as far as rearranging elements, I don't rearrange anything. Everything else stays exactly as it was. That is why these conjunctions are called coordinating conjunctions, because all you have to do is you write 2 sentences back to back and you put a conjunction in between. If the elements are the same, if the subject and the verb are the same, or even if just the subject is the same, you can eliminate this element that is identical between the 2 sentences, just like we do in English. So that's the part that you already know. Now we have a new group of conjunctions that I'm going to show you today, and those are called subordinating conjunctions. And when you have subordinating conjunctions, you have a word order change. So we no longer follow regular word order. Specifically, what you end up with is 2 parts. you end up with something called a dependent clause. And you end up with something called an independent clause. Okay, you end up with those two separate pieces. Now, as the names might imply, one of these can stand alone and one can't. Which one do you think can stand as a sentence by itself? Awesome, that's right. So the independent clause can stand alone. So that's an N, sorry. That one can stand alone. So when you have sentences that have an independent clause and a dependent clause, I can theoretically drop this part, and my second piece, or mostly first piece actually, can continue to stand because it has maintained this word order. It has this very word order right here. However, the dependent clause, the word order changes, and you're going to get to know the boot. I draw this all the time. You will see the boot a lot. And what happens is the verb gets booted. But before I show you some examples with them, let me show you what the actual words are. So here are the 7 subordinating conjunctions that you guys are, for the time being, responsible for. These are the 7 you have to know. So what they are bis, please repeat, bis, that means until. Then we have before. This might seem like a word we know in English. What do you think it is? Got it, it's before. Then we have damit, not to be mistaken for a swear word. It's damit, and that means so that. Then we have obwohl. That means although or even though. Although or even though. And then we have sobald. That's an S in the front. Sorry about the squiggle. Sobald. That means as soon as. Then we have weil. That one means because. And then we have wenn. And that means both if and when. And we have different contexts in which we use this then. You will learn some of them soon. So we have if and when. So the when is easy to remember. Hopefully the if you can remember as well. Now, do you notice something? Is there something that maybe you have thought you already learned? So hopefully you notice that we have a duplicate. We have another because. Just like we have 2 buts, we have the but and the but rather, we have 2 becauses in German. Now, unlike your aber and sondern, these 2 mean the exact same thing. There is absolutely no difference between the one that's the coordinating conjunction, it means denn, or is denn meaning because, and weil meaning because. We don't differentiate. I would argue that Germans actually prefer to use the weil, but because we're going to show you how to use the boot, Americans probably prefer the denn. So we're going to go through and do some examples of each of these so that you know how they are used. All right, so our first example, we have 2 sentences. Ich gehe zur Schule and ich mache das Abitur. Make sure that you see that that's an A. So ich mache das Abitur. Abitur is the German exit exam, so this is the exam you would take in 12th grade, soon again 13th grade, whenever you graduate. So it's the exit exam that they take. It's sort of like our SAT, just significantly harder and for more subjects. But, not important, I want to combine these 2 sentences using bis. Bis, of course, means until. So what I want to say is, I go to school until I make or do, or finish in this case, my exit exam. So until I have this exit exam, I'm going to go to school. That's what I want to say. So in order to say that, I'm going to just move down my entire first sentence. So the first sentence moves down and nothing changes. So here's my sentence. My verb is in second place, happy as can be. Nothing has changed so far. Then I'm going to put a comma. Now this is really important. Whenever you have subordinating conjunctions, you always use commas. Every single time there has to be a comma, otherwise people will get super confused. So comma, and then I'm going to use my conjunction just like I would in English, right? The conjunction goes in between. So I use bis. And then something happens. And what happens is my bis is going to boot this verb all the way to the end. Right? It boots the verb to the end. So I'm going to write the rest of my sentence. I'm going to do ich, and then I'm going to skip this because it gets booted. Das Abitur. And then I'm putting my verb at the end. Now notice, I'm still conjugating the verb. It's not that I didn't conjugate it. I just took the conjugated verb and I booted it out of second place. Of course, this part doesn't count as a spot. That's the conjunction. So here's my second place. Abitur ended up sticking its butt in there. Mache is at the end of the sentence because of the conjunction. So, ich gehe zur Schule, bis ich das Abitur mache. I'm going to give you another one. Okay, so we have, ich muss joggen gehen and es wird dunkel. So, we just did the modal verbs. What is this? Must or have to. Must or have to. So, I have to go jogging. And then I have, es wird dunkel. Werden was one of our stem changing verbs. What was werden? Okay, hopefully you got that. It's to become. To become for this one. So, es wird dunkel, it is getting dark. And ich muss joggen gehen. I have to go jogging, or I must go jogging. So, I want to combine those two with the word before. Notice there's no E on the end there, right? We changed F to V, and then no E. So, combining them, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to move this down. So, I'm going to have ich muss joggen gehen, comma. And then I'm doing the same thing. I'm going to put my conjunction. There's my conjunction. It doesn't count as a place. And it functions as a giant boot. And I'm going to boot this verb all the way to the end, but I'm keeping it conjugated. Bevor es dunkel wird. So I have to go jogging before it gets dark. Or it becomes dark. Literally translated. Okay, again, that first part, my verb stays in second place. The second part is where the verb gets booted. Now, I mentioned a minute ago that this creates two parts. This new sentence has two parts, or two clauses. And one clause is called the dependent clause, and one clause is called the independent clause. Now, let's see who was paying attention. If this is clause 1 and this is clause 2, which one is the dependent clause and which one is the independent clause? All right, hopefully you guys figured it out. This one is the independent clause because the word order is exactly the same as your regular word order. See? There you have it as a sentence. Here it is a clause as part of a sentence. Now this clause is dunkel wird. The before is, of course, not part of that clause. Is not a complete sentence. It's incomplete. It's missing chunks and the verb is out of place. So this is called the dependent clause. And the dependent clause depends on the independent clause. It needs this part. It cannot stand on its own in this word order. Hopefully that makes sense. Now I'm just going to put up example sentences for the other ones for you so that you have some. If you have any questions at the end, please put them in, and there's going to be an assignment for you guys linked. So here are the rest of your examples. Write them down. I highlighted all of the verbs for you, and specifically here at the bottom we have einschlafen is your verb, separable prefix. So the ein doesn't go all the way to the end of the sentence in this case. It now goes to the end of your clause. right? So before that comma, that's why that comma is really important. So that is where the prefix goes. And then you have the second clause, and there's a schläft at the end with umlauts. So all of those verbs are conjugated. Pause the video, write it down, and then you're going to get your assignment.